Thanks, everyone. It's such an honor to be your president this past year and to have the honor, the privilege of this stage to talk to you about my story and my career since I've had a change from an academic model to a community model. And that's why my talk is called Building the Successful Cancer Program, My Community Experience. And I think this talk is going to build off of Tom Ricketts' talk that we heard yesterday as far as team building and Dr. Scott Melvin's talk as far as change. But first, I'd like to recognize some of the people in my career that have helped me and have taught me some great lessons to help me become successful in what I do. The first two up here are Dr. Bill Baker and Dr. Jack Pickelman. I saw Dr. Pickelman in the audience here. Dr. Baker and Dr. Pickelman, as you can see here, they look like they're so relaxed. They're down to earth. They're really easygoing in these pictures. I assure you, during our training, this was not the case. But this is why I recognize them as mentors, because they both held us as residents to the highest bar. They accepted nothing less than the best from each of us. We always knew where we stood, and they taught us to be accountable for ourselves and accountable for others. Sometimes it was through fear, either fear of them or fear of hurting of a patient, but this is a lesson that we all stuck with us for the rest of our lives, being accountable. So thank you. On the next row, you have first Ravi Shankar on the far left. Dr. Shankar gave me the privilege of working in his lab for 2 years during my surgical residency. And as Bill had said, I won several awards being in that lab because of the mentorship I had with Ravi. Ravi taught me how to think like a scientist and to take every paper and every piece of data that we looked at critically and critically evaluate that. And that's been a valuable part of my rest of my training and into my career. And Ravi has become a very, very close family friend who helped both of my kids when they were days old. Next is Dr. Murray Brennan. Murray was the chair of surgery at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center when I was doing my fellowship there. Murray is one of the most brilliant people I've ever met in my life. If anybody's worked with him, they'll understand. Not only does he know a lot about oncology, but he has this great mathematical mind that's very inquisitive, and it was just amazing to us as fellows every time we had a meeting with him, the kinds of questions that he would ask. So what I learned from Murray is not just how to think like an oncologist, but also to ask questions and to be inquisitive. Dr. Richard Gamelli was my chair for most of my residency and a fair amount of the time that I was a faculty member at Loyola. Dr. Gamelli taught me how to take advantage of every opportunity that comes your way. And he actually gave me a lot of opportunities during my time there, but one of which that I'm very grateful for is that he got me involved with American Board of Surgery when I was a junior faculty at Loyola. He opened the door for me so I could learn to embrace that group of people and that society, and that's what got me into being a director of the American Board of Surgery that I am now. Dr. Arana and Dr. DeYoung were both faculty members when I was in training and again when I came back to join the faculty at Loyola. And they both sponsored me for the Midwest Surgical Association. So I have to thank you both very much for that. And Steve DeYoung actually did more than that. In 2006, after he finished his presidency, he put me on the program committee for the Midwest Surgical Association. And that was my first step to learning more about this association and becoming more involved and embracing the people and the vision that we stood for. Well, like Dr. Scirocco said, in 2012, I had a change in career, and I went to the community setting where I embraced an opportunity to develop a cancer program out in the far west suburbs. And to the success of that program, I have to thank these two gentlemen, Dr. Tony Altamari, who we all saw on stage, it was his band that played last night, and Mike Vivoda. Tony is a general surgeon at Central DuPage Hospital, and he's really the reason that I went there to start with. He had a great vision of what surgical oncology could become. They really didn't have surgical oncology there. He was a fabulous partner. He and his general surgery partners completely embraced me being there, and he showed me the ropes on how to be a good community surgeon, which is very different than being an academic surgeon. And Mike Vivoda, I don't know how many people thank a CEO of their healthcare system when they are giving these talks, but Mike shared the same vision that we shared, and his executive team embraced our vision for building a cancer program, and it's because of the resources that he invested into this program that we were able to become successful. So thank you. So where is Cadence Health? Cadence Health was the merger of Central DuPage Hospital and Del Nor Hospital in the far west suburbs. And Warrenville down here is where the cancer center is for the Central DuPage Hospital. We're about 35 to 45 miles west of the city. And in that shaded area, you can see that's really our catchment area. These are the patients that we were treating in this region. So when I got there, we first looked back and said, what do we have? What are the strong points? Well, at Central DuPage Hospital, they already had cardiac surgery. We had 24-hour intensivists, 24-hour hospitalists. That was a level 2 trauma program. There also was a good group of medical oncologists and radiation oncologists. We had a proton center, and we had gyne oncology, robotic surgery, and very, very strong general surgery. At Del Nor Community Hospital also was a level 2 trauma center. Not quite as high-end surgery was performed there, but they did have already well-established medical oncology, radiation oncology, robotic surgery, and general surgery. So we had a lot of the pieces that we needed as far as the people go, and we had the facilities. The Warrenville Cancer Center opened in July 2010. I started in November 2012. It's a beautiful facility, a state-of-the-art cancer program center. And just next door to it is the Proton Center. This Proton Center was the 9th proton center in the country to open, and it still remains the only one really in the region. And then as I started, the Del Nor Cancer Center was actually in the groundbreaking stage. And this cancer center opened around Labor Day 2013. Again, another beautiful facility with all the needs for cancer patients. So we had the people, and we had the programs, and we had some of the technology. It just needed to be organized. So the cancer program and the system developed a vision to create the first fully integrated multidisciplinary cancer program, bringing the most advanced treatments and the best outcomes to people of the Western Chicagoland. And we had some strategic enablers to allow us to do this. It became clear, though, that this was going to take a team of physician leaders to really get this to happen. And so the first step that we did when I arrived is to engage other physicians to become leaders of the cancer program with me. So while I was the medical leader of the entire cancer program, we had a leader of the Proton Center. We assigned site leaders for both the Del Nor Cancer Center and the Warrenville Cancer Center, who are both medical oncologists. We had just recruited a neuro-oncologist from academic setting to be our research director. And then we had a leader of radiation oncology. And as the physicians all, and the leadership positions all got together, along with the administrative team, we decided what we wanted to do is to be able to provide the highest quality academic level care possible to our patients in the west suburbs with unparalleled patient satisfaction and service, all close to home so patients don't have to have the stress of traveling. And to do that, the first question we ask is, what do patients want? And it's very interesting because when you look at surveys about what patients want, quality actually doesn't come out on the top. And I think that's because patients think they're already getting quality, right? So that's an assumption. But what patients list is they want their physicians that specialize in their disease. They want easy access to their physicians. They want a team of caregivers that are going to communicate and collaborate and know what's going on. They want to be treated with respect, and they want to know everybody around them is treated with respect. And they want to have access to clinical trials. Interestingly, in the community, many patients really don't want to go on a clinical trial, but they want to know they have access to clinical trials. And then last but not least, of course, quality had to have a large role in what we were developing. So we set out to do this. So first, for subspecialty. In the community setting, all of our medical oncologists and radiation oncologists were general medical oncologists and radiation oncologists. That's typical for a community setting. And it took a little bit of work to help lead them to believe that probably the better way to treat patients is to become a specialist in that area. So rather than going up to each person and saying, you need to specialize, pick an area, we took a little different approach and said, what area are you most passionate about, that you want to be an expert in? There's no way you can know everything about everything. So what area would you want to be the local expert? And we initially had 2 medical oncologists for breast, one at each hospital, that stepped up to the plate and said, I want to do breast. And that's all they started doing. And they became the busiest medical oncologists because they got all the breast. Eventually, all the other medical oncologists bought into it. And some of the younger ones, we just sort of said, okay, well, we need you to do GI. So one of them said, okay, I'll do GI. There were a couple of the older ones that had been there for a while that took a bit longer for them to understand that there was actually a reason to specialize. But we held these medical oncologists and radiation oncologists did the same thing. We held them accountable for knowing the latest clinical trials, the latest treatment that's out there for their disease. We sent them to the national conferences to bring back the data that we need to know. Literally, they became the experts. So if anybody else had a patient with their disease and that patient wanted to stay with that other physician, they knew who to go to get the expert information. Our goal was to have 75% of all patients to be seen by a specialist. The next step in the community, though, is educating the referring docs, because those people in the community realize doctors refer to doctors. So a primary care doctor would send their patient to Dr. Smith and say, I want you to have your lung cancer treated by Dr. Smith. And then we'd have to say, well, actually, Dr. Smith isn't the lung cancer specialist anymore. Dr. Jones is a lung cancer specialist. And the primary care doctors really didn't like that. They said, we don't want to look like we're stupid in front of our patients. We want them to know we know what's going on. So it took a lot of education to the referring doctors, a lot of flyers, a lot of outpatient visits, and a lot of introductions to try and get everybody to recognize the new culture that we had. But it worked, and eventually it showed that it was not only much more fulfilling for the physicians, but it was actually much better for the patients. So as far as access goes, patients want to be able to get in to see the doctor as soon as they can. So we made it a rule that patients would be able to see a physician within 48 hours of making a phone call to the cancer center. It was not, we'll try, it was, we will make this happen. And some of the ways we made that happen is we decentralized scheduling to be done at the cancer centers. We distributed all the access numbers all across the healthcare system for the cancer center numbers so people knew who to call. We then had to adjust the schedules for our specialists because people had to be able to get somebody in within 48 hours. And you can do this, you just have to do it. I mean, there's always a way to make that happen. We also took it under our wing to schedule every test for every patient that they needed so that they didn't have to do anything themselves. And I was a little bit of a bear with this. I got, we can't do that, we have to get a referral first. There's a gazillion excuses for it. And I just said, we're gonna do this and we're gonna make it happen. And I just didn't take no for an answer, and it happened. All of our patients get all their tests set up for them before they leave their cancer center. We then had to rebuild the website because the website was woefully inadequate. And then I actually started making cold calls. So I was a little bit obsessed with this. And I would call the cancer centers at all kinds of times of the day, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, noon. I'd find a number on the website for the cancer center at 10 o'clock at night, and I'd say, I wonder what number that is, and I would call that. And sometimes the phone would ring and ring and ring, and eventually someone would pick up the phone, and I'd say, hey, this is Dr. Shoup. Are you guys really busy today? What took so long to answer the phone? It got to the point that the people answering the phones at the call center actually recognized my cell phone number because I called so many times. So I started using my assistant's cell phone, my kid's cell phone, anybody's cell phone I could find. But it worked. We had the phones now are answered after 1 or 2 rings, and patients are getting in to see doctors within 48 hours. We started to get busier when all this started happening. We had to add some more resources, and luckily, our administrative leaders recognized that, and the cancer center was only 3 years old when we actually underwent a massive reconstruction for it to rebuild and to build out to get more patients in. We already had a CT PET, but we replaced it with a 64-slice CT scanner so that we could do higher quality CT scans. We put an MRI in the cancer center at Warrenville because we didn't have one there. Patients were having to go to the hospital at CDH. At Delnor, they had that, but the campus for cancer was right across the parking lot at Delnor. At CDH, it was 5 miles away. We put in plain film capabilities. We added ultrasound. We could get our patients EKGs, so we didn't have to send them anywhere else for pre-op testing. And we added a gamma knife. So essentially, for our brain tumor program, we now had an intraoperative MRI, a proton center, and a gamma knife. We then, with the teams that I talked about before, with everybody who has picked a specialty that they wanted to be in, every single member of our cancer program was a member of a team. Everybody was. We had 7 teams that we developed, lung, GI, gyne-onc, and so on, as you can see here. These teams did a lot more than just have tumor boards. These teams actually were working groups. They met at specific times of the year, every month, every other month, as needed, to do more than just talk about patient care, but talk about pathways, protocol developments, outcomes, quality projects we were going to take on, what clinical trials we were going to open, and any other projects that we had, such as a high-risk breast clinic. And we had a leader for each one of those working groups who was held accountable to make sure that these teams got together and did what we were asking them to do. And this is just, I don't expect you to read this, but this is just an example. All of our guidelines were based on NCCN guidelines, all of our protocols, but there's so much variability within NCCN guidelines that we picked the cadence way of doing things. So what happened at CDH happened at Del Nor. You came in with rectal cancer, with a liver met at CDH, you were gonna get the same workup and the same treatment as you would at Del Nor. And that's because the teams crossed the hospital system. So everybody got to know each other, the medical oncologists got to know each other, the radiation oncologists, and they started working together. We came up with tumor boards every day of the week, sometimes twice on a day. Every tumor board started either 7 or 7:30 in the morning. And yes, we had our medical oncologist there, our radiation oncologist there, our pathologist there, and our radiologist there at 7 o'clock in the morning. Everyone started to buy into this team approach, and everyone was getting excited about discussing patients. We also video conferenced the tumor boards across the system. So if you were at Del Nor Hospital, or if you were at Warrenville Cancer Center, or if you were at the Proton Center, or if you were at CDH, everyone was live and video conferenced into the same tumor board, and everybody was involved in the discussion. The next part of this is respect. One of the biggest things in my mind when we were opening this cancer center, or developing this cancer center over time, is that it's so important that we treat every patient like family. I mean, everywhere you go, people say patients first, patients are our priority, but this was so important to me for a lot of different reasons that we started talking to everybody about this. Every patient, treat them like you would your family. We had to remind people who work with us that patients are emotional. Some of them are going through the worst time of their life, and we can't change that, but we can at least make it a little bit better. We need to be caring. We need to be understanding, and you can't take it personally when a patient gets upset. They're mad. They have cancer. Let them get upset. But take them through their journey as if they were your mom or your dad or your sister or your brother. What would you want them to have their experience be like? We engaged the front line. We had monthly staff meetings. We sought input from everybody involved, from the doorman to the receptionist to the medical assistants, to get their ideas of how things could work better. And people were really getting into it. And then the backbone of our program became this navigation model. We added a navigation model for both Warrenville and Del Nor cancer centers, where every patient that called that was a new patient spoke with a nurse who is a navigator. That nurse would then get the information about the patient and hand them off to the specialty navigator. And those specialty navigators became the go-to person for those patients. We also revamped our clinical trials office. We closed a lot of trials that just weren't accruing patients. We strengthened the leadership. We added more research coordinators. Our physicians actually became motivated to put patients on trials. We had medical oncologists in our system that had never put a patient on a clinical trial. It just wasn't what they did. But as we got together with teams, and that became part of the team's mission, is to open clinical trials, it became a little bit of a game. It became fun for them to put them on. And we were completely transparent. We held up put up a sign up in the medical oncology offices, each medical oncologist, each surgical oncologist, and who put somebody on trial and how many people they put on trials each month. And so we could say it was a little bit of a competition. They could see where they stood with everybody else. But the other thing is, if one breast medical oncologist only put one patient on a trial in a year and another one put on 10, it gave the person who only put one on to talk to the person who put on 10 and said, what are you saying differently to these patients to get them to sign up for these trials? We were completely transparent, and we became a very robust clinical trials program. So the quality is something that I personally became accountable for. As leader of the cancer program, this obviously is something that's incredibly important. We were able to hire a dedicated oncology nurse for the cancer program who became the quality director with me. Every week, we reviewed the data from the registry, the quality teams. We went through over each PSI to review every time something came up as a PSI score. We would evaluate it to see if it was accurate. We reviewed the readmissions, the VTE. I mean, we really dove into this, and myself and one of the gynae oncologists together really took the lead on this as far as physicians are put together. We had a quality steering committee that was made up of both inpatient and outpatient services with really clear goals. We also had at least once a week, if not twice a week, meetings with oncology administrative leaders as well as the physician leadership team to discuss our ideas, our issues, performances, quality improvement. It was great communication with the physicians and the leaders, including the CEO and the presidents of the hospitals every week. We had dashboards for each one of the working groups. This is just an example of the thoracic one. Every single working group had their dashboard that they went through and picked out quality improvement projects from these. For surgical oncology, I could give a whole talk on what we had to do to work on surgical oncology, but suffice it to say, thank goodness I had super great support from the general surgeons at St. DuPage Hospital with Tony and his partners. They were there to back me up. They covered me when I was not on call. They worked with me on all my surgeries, so every Whipple or liver or esophagus, they always scrubbed with me in them. We had a lot of work to do with nursing education. The nurses weren't used to seeing these kinds of patients on the floor. And it took a lot of persistence, and I think I was a little bit of a thorn in some people's side about this, but I felt very strongly that the surgical oncology patients go to the same wing every time and have the same group of nurses taking care of them every time. And one thing Mike Voivoda had said to me when I started working there is, if you ever have any obstacles that you are running into that you can't solve to help, that you think this cancer program needs, let me know. Well, this time I had to let him know. I said, I hate to pull this card, but this is really important. So we actually made a rule that the nurses on the floor weren't allowed to take care of our patients if they hadn't gone through a nursing education class by my nurse practitioner. So they understood what they were looking for. They understood what these patients were going through, what the surgeries were. We then eventually got the pathologists and radiologists to start to specialize. We ended up getting dedicated anesthesia teams, a dedicated OR team. I know this is hard to believe, but there were actually some anesthesiologists and some scrub techs that didn't want to work with me. I don't know, don't figure. But we really held very high standards, and there is luckily some groups that really did want to work with not just myself, but work on these complex patients. And I demanded that it was the same group every time. If they put somebody in my room that I'd never seen before, and I'm getting ready to do a complex HPB, I went straight to the front desk and I said, if this was your husband, how would you feel if I was operating on him with this scrub tech I've never worked with before? So after a while, they learned, don't pull that trick on Margot. She's not going to go for that. Eventually, we were able to recruit great surgical oncologists. We have 2 thoracic surgical oncologists. We have 2 gyne oncologists. We have a neurosurgeon that specializes in brain tumor. We have 3 breast surgeons. And now I have a partner for GI, soft tissue, and melanoma. And this group of surgical oncologists sort of functions like your department of surgical oncology, like you would have in an academic center. So what happened? So over the first couple of years, we found great volume growth. Our growth was going up at double digits a year. Our patient satisfaction scores were increasing. We had physicians that actually wanted to come into the cancer center to see patients because word was getting out that we were doing really a great job. We sent surveys to medical staff. Actually, we didn't, but the administration did, and it came back that cancer was what they were most proud of at our medical staff meetings. We then started getting patients who were coming to see us that were being recommended from their friends and their families and their neighbors. We got the anesthesia and pathology to finally specialize, so we had the same pathologist every single time at each tumor board, the same radiologist each time at each tumor board. And the amazing thing is the radiologists started to work with the radiologists across the system, even though there were 2 different groups, to develop templates and to work on specialty ways of reading these scans. So everything was really on the right track. You know, we felt like we really had a good program going. I have to tell you, though, something was missing. And it was hard for me to actually figure out what this was, but on paper, everything looked really good, and the physicians were doing what they wanted to do, but something just seemed like it was missing. We had some open positions in the cancer center. We had not physician positions, but staff positions. We had a higher turnover among the staff than I really thought that we should have had. Our staff appreciation scores were okay, but they weren't great. The physician teams worked well together, but I think they could have been better. And it just seemed like there was still a lot of work to do. And here I was, the only GI surgical oncologist at the time, working full-time as a surgical oncologist and full-time as a cancer director. I had high expectations for everybody, myself included, and everybody around me. And I held everybody, including myself, accountable for the outcomes. But the problem is, I was doing it without any emotional intelligence. So I had a courageous conversation. Well, actually, Mike had a courageous conversation with me. He said, Margot, I want to take you out to dinner. And I thought, okay, my CEO wants to take me out to dinner. He said, you pick the place and time. I said, well, I'm not getting fired because it's not coffee. So the cancer center is doing pretty well, so I don't think I'm getting fired. And he asked me a few questions and made a few statements that I'll never forget. You probably remember this. He said to me, what motivates you? And I thought, well, that's a really interesting question. What does motivate me? And actually, I really thought about it. You know, what motivates me is I think that every patient out here in the far west suburbs, every patient in the country, as a matter of fact, should have access to great health care, great cancer care, without having to have the stress of trying to drive somewhere that's far away, be away from their family, pay for a hotel, pay for parking. That's what motivates me, and that's what I want to build here. And then next he said to me, why are you working so hard? Whose CEO asked them why they're working so hard? And I thought, well, there's a lot of work to do. How can I not work hard? And he said to me, but there's always tomorrow. You don't have to get everything done today. And many of you might know this, but just before I started this position at Cadence Health, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And when you are a cancer patient, the word tomorrow takes on a whole different meaning. It's never guaranteed. So to me, I wanted to get everything done today. I didn't want to wait till tomorrow. But the rest of the world doesn't work like that. He said, your program's successful, but people are afraid of you. They're doing it out of fear. They're working hard out of fear. And I thought to myself, really? They're afraid of me? It didn't dawn on me that people were afraid of me. And he said, yeah, that's how you're motivating them. He said, I want you to be successful. And then again, I thought, I didn't say this at the time, but I thought, well, thanks. But I thought I was successful. I'm a director of the American Board of Surgery. I'm running this great cancer program that's a talk of the healthcare system. I'm the secretary of the Midwest Surgical Association. I'm the treasurer of the Central Surgical Association. I thought I was successful. And he said, let me get you a coach. And I thought, okay, that's great, a coach. What better who would turn down a coach? It only can make you better. Well, let me tell you something. If you're gonna get a coach, you gotta be prepared to change. So the first thing that my coach did was he did a 360-degree evaluation. What this is, if you don't know, is that they go around and they ask people certain questions, people that report to you, your peers, your executives that you work with, various people about your leadership style and what it's like to work with you. It is a very telling sign. People are very honest when you read these. And when you read these evaluations about you, you can't ignore the answers, the results. I think these are incredibly valuable as long as they're used correctly. The only people that should see the results of these evaluations are you and your coach, nobody else. It shouldn't be used to be punishment against you or to give you a promotion. It's really to make you better, so nobody else needs to see it. I then took all kinds of questionnaires and surveys that we all take about leadership style. And when it came to some of the leadership style questions, I scored great, 95th, score out of 100 as far as being a visionary, hard worker, dedicated, team building, being focused. But the emotional intelligence questions, I was in the single digits. And at first I thought, well, I'm a surgeon, what do you expect? I'm in the single digits. But that actually wasn't really a very good thing. I was a little bit shocked, and Doug, my coach, said to me, well, how would your family describe you? And I said, well, I'm not really sure. And he said, well, ask them. And so I have some quotes here this is before I started the coaching. From my daughter, Mom, you're hardworking, you're assertive, you're quick to the point, but you're fun to be around. I got from my son, you know what you want, and you want it a specific way. You have high expectations for everybody, including the cashier and the cab driver, but you're compassionate. And I got from my husband, you're driven, you don't like failure, but you're passionate. I thought, well, that wasn't exactly what I was hoping to hear. So it became apparent over the time that I was working with the coach that I was actually running the cancer program like it was a surgery residency in the 1990s, which was great for back then. It's not great for now. And it's not great for working in a community cancer center, and it's not great when you're working with staff and community physicians. There's no question that I was able to help raise the bar. We made good doctors, great doctors. The ones that didn't become great doctors left, and we expected the best effort from everyone. So how do you develop this emotional intelligence? It takes some work. So my coach said to me, do you care about the people you work with? And I said, well, of course I care about them. He said, well, do they know that? I said, well, I'm sure they know that. Well, how would they know that? And I said, I guess I say hi every morning. How are you doing? And he said, no, you need to ask them more. Ask them about their personal life. Ask them how they're doing. Ask them show them that you care. And I thought, it's none of my business about their personal life. I don't want to ask them these questions. And he said, it makes a difference. They will tell you what they want you to know. So believe it or not, I actually said, all right, I'll give it a try. I actually put on my calendar every single day, go talk to somebody different and ask them something about their personal life. And I would check it off at the end of the day if I did it. So how was your weekend? What did you do? Oh, who's that with you in your picture on your office? I learned that the nurse I've been working with for 2 years was divorced. I didn't even know that. So anyway, over time, it was, at first it almost didn't feel authentic. I felt like I was prying. But over time, I got to know them as people, and they actually got to know me as a person, because they would ask me the same questions back. And it was a different kind of relationship that we started building. We started complimenting each other. We started celebrating the successes. Eventually, the authenticism came through. So during this time, about a year's worth of work, I accumulated dozens of leadership and teamwork building books on my iPad. And this is a group of them that really meant a lot to me. The last one, the one, if Disney Ran Your Hospital, if you haven't read that, that's a great book. If you want to talk about customer service, that's a great book. Leadership from the Inside Out, Becoming a Leader for Life. This is a book that I actually still refer to. You can't just sit down and read it. You have to think about it a lot when you're reading this book. And there's an expert in this book that I'm going to paraphrase, but a gentleman walks up to a British soldier who's guarding a temple and the British soldier says to this gentleman, "Who are you? Where are you going? And why are you going there?" And you think about it, that's pretty deep questions, right? Who are you? Where are you going? And why are you going there? And the gentleman said to the soldier, "How much do you get paid every day?" And he said, £20. And he said, "I'll give you 50 if you ask me those 3 questions every time I come by." So those are just some of the things in this book that makes you think about. But over time, as we got to know each other, I got to know the people better. It was really I hate to say a trickle-down effect, but this kind of culture change has to come from the leadership, where people really care about each other, not just about the patients that we serve. And our staff started becoming inspired. They were going the extra mile. They were doing things we didn't ask them to do. We had people who were hiring, we made it clear that they knew that when they were coming on to join us, they were joining a culture. They were not just taking a job. People became invested in the program. We had staff that left that actually came back, and some with a lower pay. Patients started giving us not just high praise, but they were loyal because people would go out of their way to do things for them. Inputs and ideas surfaced. Everyone had some great thoughts. The physicians took ownership of their teams that they were leading, their visions and their goals, and I just had to get out of the way and let them do it because everyone was really motivated to make this work. So now a year had gone by, and I asked my family again these same questions. How would you describe me? And my daughter said, "You hold people to high standards, which makes them believe they can do more than they think they would be able to do on their own." My son said, "You strive to be the best, but you also build up others to be the best they can be. You're motivational." And my husband said, "You're determined to succeed, but you love to inspire others." Yes, that's what I wanted to hear from my family. And this is what every administrator wants to see. What were the outcomes with this? Well, guess what? Our volumes were increasing like crazy. We've doubled our volume of new patients in the last 5 years. Our revenue was going up just at the same level. We became the market leader for cancer care in our region. We had opened over a lot of clinical trials and have more than tripled the number of patients going on clinical trials to the point we're actually one of the highest accruing centers in the world for NRG and SABP, RTOG and GOG for cancer centers our size, 4th highest accruing in the world. Our patient satisfaction scores have been consistently in the 98th to 99th percentile every single quarter for the last year and a half. Our recent physician satisfaction scores are in the top decile. Our staff satisfaction scores are on the rise. And now we have a reputation as not only a great place to get care, but a great place to work. This is what you meant by be successful. Since our merger with Northwestern a few years ago, the West region, now that I oversee, has actually become bigger. We partnered with Kishwaukee Health, which is 3 more centers out here. So here is where we are that I was with to start. Kishwaukee is out in DeKalb. We also have an infusion center in Rochelle. and a critical access hospital down in Sandwich. This is our entire West region of the cancer program. And it was actually great when we brought on this new healthcare system because we were able to institute all the same policies, procedures, and pathways that we currently had. So now, if you get diagnosed with lung cancer, you're going to get the same kind of workup and the same kind of treatment, whether you're in DeKalb, or if you're in Geneva, or if you're in Warrenville. And that's what we need to see happen. I started my talk by talking about some of the mentors that I had in my career and how they impacted me. I'm going to end my talk with my family and some of the lessons that I've learned from them. On the far left, that's my picture of myself with my mom when we were in Paris when I was in college. I minored in French, so my mom took me to Paris, to France for a little while. My mother, unfortunately, was both diagnosed and passed away from breast cancer during my general surgery residency, so she didn't really get to know my kids very well. But one of the things my mother always said to me is, you can't arrive without having traveled. And that is so true. And the other thing my mother always said to me is, and installed in both my sister and my brother and myself, is that you can do anything if you really put your mind to it. And that was my motivation. My dad is on the right side. He's here with his wife, Sarah. My dad lives in Carmel, Indiana. He's an avid Colts fan, as am I. And this is a picture of us at the Colts game. My dad was an incredibly hard worker when I was growing up. We didn't see him a lot. He traveled internationally, he was gone a lot, but I never felt like he was missing from my life. So what I learned from my father is the value of hard work, and more importantly, the value of ethical work. He's one of the most ethical people I know. So thank you, Dad. My brother and sister, my sister is less than a year older than I am. We've always been very close. She lives in St. Louis. We have a friendly family rivalry with the St. Louis Blues and the Blackhawks for our yearly games that we go to. My sister is incredibly generous, and she's actually been known to, at the drop of a hat, to come out and be by our side, be by my side for times when I needed her, which she's had to do, unfortunately, a couple times in the last 5 years. But what I learned from my sister is it's not what you have, it's who you have and who you are. My brother is 4 years older than I am, and he is a defense attorney in a small town in the Southern California desert. He is one of the most laid-back people and stress-free people I've ever met. It's actually kind of amazing that we're related. One thing we definitely share is our love of the outdoors, and whenever I have a meeting in Southern California, I always spend an extra day out there so I can see my brother. And this was one at a recent meeting that we had in San Diego. I went out to see him at Joshua Tree National Park, and we went for a hike out there. What I've learned from my brother is it's not worth stressing over things you can't change. It's not going to make things better, and it's just going to make you sick. And this is my family. Michael and I have been married for 27 years, but I fell in love with him 33 years ago. And I fell in love with him because he made me laugh, and he makes me laugh every day. And Michael gave up his career as a figure skating coach to bring up our kids, and he's really helped me keep all of this in life in perspective. So thank you, Michael, for making me laugh and keeping life in perspective. My beautiful children, now young adults, Erica and Dylan, as Bill said, they're both in college now. We are so incredibly proud of the respectful and kind young adults that they've become. You know, our family, we actually like hanging out together. We enjoy doing things together. We enjoy going on vacation together and spending time together. And this picture actually was taken in Greece earlier this summer when we were on vacation there. And a week after we got back from Greece, we found out that Erica had leukemia. And I'm telling you this because life is going to throw some curveballs at you. And gosh knows, you know, we've had plenty come our way in the last 5 years. But these curveballs do a lot more than make you change your plans. These curveballs make you take a step back and think about what's really important. And this is what's really important: family. So I'd like to thank the Midwest Surgical for the opportunity of being your president for the last year and for the floor. Thanks.